Muizenbergers reminisce about every person, street, building, shop, and grain of sand, but it means absolutely nothing to those who have not experienced living there in its prime. Therefore, exhibitions and nostalgia trips such as this are important, not only for Muizenbergers and those that came to holiday there, but also for the opportunity they provide to pull the threads of a family's past through the present and onto the future. They help to cement the generational link to our culture and upbringing. In my case with me here today are my daughters and my mother, Ray Frank, who could tell you ex-Muizenbergers much more than you already know about your family's histories. There was great excitement and a sense of nostalgia when I saw that the exhibition was on for the first time in Cape Town, and a former neighbour, Mervyn Rosenberg, spoke at that opening. I saw some of the pictures that were on display, and at the time regretted that I was not there. And then my sister in Israel saw the exhibition in Herzliya, so I was doubly upset that I probably was not going to see it. And then it went on to London, but now due to the efforts of Eli Rabinovitz, B'nai Brett and Vivian Radomski, here we are, and I'm really, really excited and thank them very much. I emigrated from South Africa almost 35 years ago, and while I'm extremely happy having made the decision to come to Australia, I've realized, to use a well-worn expression, that you can take the boy out of Muizenberg, but you can't take Muizenberg out of the boy. Even today, mental flashbacks seem to take me back to the beach, to the fly, to the pavilion, and will let me call back some of the past. I mentioned the fly. I grew up in Yarmouth Road, which is what my wife Michelle refers to as a modern shtetl. We had our own community in one street, and together with another half a dozen streets close by, such as Windermere, Dartmouth, The Row, Scarborough, Hastings and Clifton, formed the initial boundaries of our world. I've worked out that there are probably more than a dozen people living in Sydney from Yarmouth Road alone. We used to pick and eat the sour figs from the faking or fig plants which grew wild in the vacant lots close by. We played cricket in the street or in a driveway with rules which constantly changed depending on who was batting or who was bowling. At the corner of the road was the wooden scout hall, with its many rooms and stuffed heads of various species of buck adorning the walls. Alongside the hall was to us as kids a great big sand hill which we used to climb. This was close to the footbridge, from where we fished with lines tied to the railings as we couldn't afford any rods. Personal safety was not a concern at the time, as our parents knew we were somewhere in Muizenberg and that was pretty safe. The Scout Hall was also the venue for the second Muizenberg Jewish Scouts. Meetings were held on Sunday mornings at the hall, and we also had various Jewish movement meetings in Muizenberg at various times. There was Beitar, Habonim, Hashomer Hatza'ir, and B'nai Akiva. My dad used to tell me that in the 1930s he used to belong to the Young Israel Society there. The footbridge was our gateway to the wider Muizenberg world. I used to cross it at least twice a day, to and from Muizenberg. Muizenberg Junior School. That's it. Who could forget Mr. W.W. King, the principal, Miss Rooney, Miss Slavitt, who was an unbelievable disciplinarian, we were all in fear of her, and Mr. Bishop. Along the way to school, we passed our cheder in Wherry Road. Our teachers there who tried hard, but probably unsuccessfully, were Mr. and Mrs. Swolansky and Reverend Goldberg, among others. Discipline was not good after a day at school or after an afternoon of rugby or cricket practice at the school fields alongside the flay. The footbridge was also the path which led to the beachfront, the focus for all the holiday makers. On the way to the beach on Alexander Road, we passed the kosher hotels, such as Crickler's Hotel, the Imperial, the Mountain View. There was the Haifa Hotel in Hanson Road, the Rio Grande in Melrose Road, and there were a number of kosher boarding houses all over the back streets close by the beachfront. Then there were the non-kosher hotels, such as the Balmoral, the Marine, the Atlantic, the Alexandra, the Belgrave, the Sandown, the Muizenberg, and the Victoria, and I'm sure I've left a few out. Many houses were let out to Transvaalers who came down on holiday for anything from 2 to 6 weeks. The beach was the center of the universe. Beautiful, gleaming, white sands. Safe bathing with little backwash. Colourful bathing boxes for changing, which were hired out on a permanent or casual basis, although many seemed to be in some need of repair. Beach chairs were hired for the day, but it was on the beach, and in particular the snake pit, the very crowded snake pit, where friendships for the season or for life were made. Many a romance was kindled on the beach, some burnt out quickly, and some, like mine, have shone for years. The only dangerous aspect of the beach was after a strong southeasterly, and the possibility of being stung by blue bottles. The stings were soon soothed by a liberal dosage of diluted Reckitt's Blue from the first aid office in the pavilion. The beach was also the home of endless hours of beach bats, bok, and touch rugby. We smeared olive oil and coconut oil on our bodies to tan. Nobody was aware of melanomas, and the longer and darker you tanned, the healthier you looked. One of the real characters of Muizenberg Beach was Leipka, or Gunneth. He knew everyone. He walked around selling peaches, nectarines, lychees, plums, and monkey nuts. He was brought up in a Jewish household, as his mother was a domestic servant there. He spoke perfect Yiddish and was often seen in lengthy Heimische conversations mit der alte Hidden. The pavilion was the centre of it all, as that is where the Sunday evening concerts were held. If we were short of cash, the favourite way of getting in was by sneaking upstairs and trying to open one of the doors to one of the boxes or a side door to the circle. During the day, Vic Davis was in charge of the children's concerts on the stage at the top of the stairs leading down to the snake pit. Kids used to venture onto the stage to do their piece. One of the sweetest voices heard there was that of Benny Kaplinski, who now lives in Sydney. Along the beachfront we had our cafes. There was Norman's Beach Cafe, where we sat at the Formica top tables in cubicles and ate our hot dogs or hamburgers with real beetroot, while we listened to the music playing on the jukebox. Next door was the less salubrious Maccabi Cafe run by Tex. There were rows of pinball machines at the back, where we invariably tilted the games by pushing the machines too hard and lost our money. The parents had their afternoon teas after having spent the mornings on the more staid Balmoral Beach at the Majestic with its lace-curtained windows. Not far from the Majestic was Sax's Delicatessen. It was in our eyes famous for Mrs. Sax's white cheese. They must have sold tons of the cheese over the years. Palmer Road was the centre of the commercial activities. Fish was bought from Mrs. Schneider, whose shop was later taken over by the Zivs. Another Mrs. Schneider made the best bulkelach and Hammentaschen. And a Mr. Schneider was a butcher. The Lewensteins sold poultry, and there were a couple of dairies there as well. Trappers sold groceries, while further afield you bought your school uniforms from Dankers. There were so many shops that we regularly shopped at. We supported each other, we were self-sufficient. In addition, most of the pharmacists and medical practitioners in Muizenberg were Jewish. Not only did we buy our fish from the shops, but also from the horse-drawn carts. The fishermen used to drag their nets in the early morning, and it was fun going down to the beach at times to help them drag in the nets. On reflection, we were probably more of a hindrance than a help. About an hour or two after they had dragged in their nets, we used to hear the fish horns being sounded as the fish carts came down the streets, and from those carts we bought silverfish, harders, chaljoen, and hottentot. The fish were usually covered in sand and very fresh. They still had to be scaled and gutted at home. Further on from Norman's and the Maccabi was the Empire Bioscope. That's not cinema, but bioscope. If you hadn't had your first cigarette under the promenade at the Snake Pit, then this was the place to experiment. Your budget determined where you sat. On a Saturday afternoon, all the kids in the first 8 rows, were in the first 8 rows, as that was all we could afford. The manager was Mr. Phillips, who was always dressed in his bow tie and dinner jacket, whether it was Saturday morning or the more formal Saturday night. Many a Saturday morning after shul, we used to see what was on at the bioscope. We usually got that interval with a collection of pass-outs in our pocket. You see, the bioscope would change the official colour of pass-outs from one session to another. So we had to have the correct colour pass-out in our pockets if we wanted to get in without paying. It was also the place where we swapped our comics. I mentioned that we used to go there after shul on occasions. Muizenberg shul was an integral part of my upbringing, as it was for others. At its peak, Muizenberg was home to 600 Jewish families. Kids had to sit on the bima steps on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur as the shul was so packed. Summer services with holiday makers also packed out the shul. Across the road from the shul was a park which had a stream running down from the mountain which overlooked Muizenberg. During services, we kids used to take off to catch tadpoles there. We also attempted to play a rugby game on one solitary occasion on the bowling green which is in the park. Most of the club bowlers at the time were at shul, and we were certainly admonished very quickly once we were spotted. The shul choir was trained by Benny Galansky, the chazan or cantor was Reverend Goldwasser, the rabbi was Rabbi Weinberg, the shamus was Mr. Brooks, who always hushed us up in shul, and the assistant chazan was Mazeda, Reverend Frank. He was an institution. Everyone knows about his swimming every day of the year, barring Shabbat and Yom Tovim. He used to walk briskly to the beach in his all-in-one bathing suit, covered by his beach gown. He used to exercise on the beach and wrap seaweed around him, as he believed the iodine in the seaweed had beneficial health properties. He was appointed to the shul as a shochet, teacher in Bocha in December 1924 for the sum of £35 per month. He taught Cheder at the Talmud Torah school in its original premises, and after a new building was erected in Wherry Road in the 1930s. He was a product of the Tel Yeshiva in Lithuania and made a living from selling honey from his beehives before migrating to South Africa in 1921. He was the original fitness fanatic. His bedroom had medicine balls, chest expanders, and wrist grips. His walls were adorned with exercise charts. I remember him falling off while repairing his roof in his late 70s or early 80s, breaking a number of ribs. After being told to rest and recover in bed for a lengthy period, he got up only after a few days to continue his usual routine. He was also strictly kosher, and when he was diagnosed as having diabetes in his later life, he refused to take insulin, as it was then made from pig's pancreas. He served the community for 41 years. We were certainly fortunate enough to have grown up in this Cape Town suburb, physically distant from our peers further up the line. We knew everybody, we mixed with all, we had everything we needed on our doorsteps, and as children, it was all free. We were not a privileged community, but made the most of what we had. We grew up to be appreciative. Life was simple. We had the sun, the beach, and the sand. And for all those who want to have a game of jacks, here's a supply of peach chips. I think the sand's over there. And with those words, I declare the Memories of Muizenberg exhibition open. And also, if anybody else wants to come share some memorabilia, by all means come up.